Well, for a very special occasion, time for our comic corner. Not with two Ks, with two Cs, I guess.
You realize I'm not like the comic book specialist here, right?
Well, but that's the best part. We don't have to be specialists. We're just, like people who read comics that really enjoy them. And I feel maybe that's our whole tagline. Like, so in short, for our group, we, decided to come up with essentially to keep playing at our local store. We decided to start a comic pool list so they would let us use their gaming tables to do whatever we needed to do.
We
So
pretty
we
much we're pretty much paying them to let us stay in their place.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. It's like
Unofficial rent.
we're
That's pretty
almost
much.
homeless, except we live out of comic boxes, not physical cardboard boxes.
Which reminds me, I have to grab more. All right.
So we have three titles that, as a group, we're following, and the first one up, as you can see on your screens, or maybe you don't, as Jared won't see it on his screen, but everyone else who's watching the video see on the screen, is a title called Either. Now, apparently written by Matt Kind, that's how you pronounce it, and David Rubin.
That's
Uh,
what it is.
we essentially picked our three pools. We went to go for a mix of things that we've never seen before, things that were new and coming, and essentially we're sold by either the tagline in the comic preview book. Most comic shops will have like a huge catalog that has upcoming months of things that are coming out. And we decided, hey, this looks pretty cool based on the cover art. Let's check this out. So the first one we have up here is The Either. I said, written by Matt Kint, or illustrated, and David Rubin. And so what are your thoughts on it, Jared? Our resident comic book specialist. I lie. He literally said he is not a comic book specialist.
Yes. Yes, I'm not a specialist, but I do like comics and I do like stories. And from the
And you
very
could read. I feel you could read at a third grade level at least. There's a lot of picture books. You're like, well, I failed at reading novels, so I think picture books
no,
are
no,
the last
I just
stand.
look at the art and then just ignore the large text boxes because text boxes are annoying.
You assume that you're like, hello, and then there's like a bunch of words, and then you're like, goodbye. It's like, good, I got it. I
No,
hope
I
you.
base everything off like perception of the images. And like if they can't tell a story with images, fuck them.
Well, I mean,
But
okay, that's not too far off of a thing. All right. So
okay,
what did you think? Like, what first? Because I know it was kind of a group decision to get into each book. So based on the cover, I don't know if you can draw it up there. You have physically the book in your hand.
yeah.
What made you as a group say like, hey, I don't mind picking this up and spending my hard-earned money, uh, reading this as a group together? What based just off of the cover? What is your first impression?
First impression, the artwork would seemed interesting because again, it's depicting an adventure in what seems to be two planes. One's depressing, one seems to be a bit colorful, but also kind of dark. That was my first impression looking at this cover. It's a Dark Horse comic, so I know eventually there's an end to this story.
Oh
Unlike
well, that is true. Yeah, Dark Horse doesn't really play around too much. Dark Horse
yeah,
Image,
like
Vertigo, all those are really cool. Some of my favorite when I first started collecting comics, those were some of the things I started aiming for. Those publishing houses or whatever they want to be called.
yeah, I was always the DC Marvel fanboy, and I was like, this is pretty cool. And then as I got older, I was like, these stories don't end.
They just keep. I mean, the other day I saw a Batman issue that was like 900 something, and I was like, huh, that must be just this storyline.
No, no, they restarted and they also restarted issues.
They
Unless
do
it's
a couple of
detective.
restarts, which is fair considering time has passed. Certain concepts. I mean, Joker's been rebooted about. He died officially at least four times. I mean, he died in the first issue. Who's ever, he was taken out as a villain for Batman. He died in the first issue. Who was ever out, and then people liked him so much they just kept bringing him back.
Yeah,
I
that's
don't know if
retconned
you
and
if you
all.
knew that or not, but yeah, that was one of those things. Big
Uh,
Joker fan, of course.
partially.
Um, Okay, so reading through the book, obviously spoilers are included. I will throw that up there for at least for the first issue, since you can kind of surmise the whole thing based on a little blurb when they first sell you the book. Looking through the book, how did you feel? How looking through every page, what was immediately what caught your eye? What from the get
Well,
go to the end of the
actually,
first issue?
okay. So the interesting about this is it's not exactly what I expected from the cover. It's what I judged upon it. I was like, all right, so what am I gonna get into this? Looking at the cover, it seems a bit dark and dreary in a sense because the overall color scheme, even if it looks like two different worlds, it doesn't seem so pleasant. And then by the first page, I'm like, there's bright colors everywhere. How did that happen? What did I get? And you get the sense I'm like, this is not as serious as you thought it was.
Yeah, I think in particular, if I'm thinking of the same thing you are, was this baboon-looking creature on the right-hand side of the original cover. He is sort of a gatekeeper of worlds, and
Yeah,
the main character goes up to him and he goes, "Hey, I have to go to this certain place," and he does this whole show and dance. And he goes, "You know
he
where
does.
I'm going. Do we have to do this every time?" And the monkey takes, or ape or orangutan takes great delight in apparently crossing through worlds. This orangutan ape creature has to kick you in the butt all the way across planes until you reach the chosen world, which I thought was kind of hilarious. I really didn't expect that either coming off the
Yeah,
bat.
it's
I thought
like
it was going to be a little. It looks a little bit cartoony, but you sometimes these things can turn really violent or really colorful and vivid in a short span. So I was really amazed that the monkey took such great joy in physically kicking him into another plane of his destination and whatnot.
I enjoyed it too because like he's on one act, it's like, all right, this guy is completely Shakespearean. Like, hey, uh, why did you come here? This is that, and the guy's like, we've done this already 1,000 times. I know exactly what you're gonna ask me. Just get me to where I want to go. And it's like, sure, and then kicks him directly where he wants to go. And it's like, as you said, it's like it's unexpected from like the first 2 pages, and from what you gather already, this isn't a guy discovering a new place. This is a guy who's been here way too many times, and like pretty much everyone knows his name.
Yeah,
And you
it
get
seems
that.
like he he goes into the town, the main town, and he comes across a bunch of random merchants, and they all know him by name, and they're very familiar with him. So of course, like in the beginning, he said he's been there 1,000 times. He's kind of like an explorer, scientist, adventurer, and he apparently has been to this one plane of existence or whatever. Like I said, we just from the first book, from what I've gathered, he's been here so many times that all of the characters in the city kind of already know him. You know, all of these random merchants and street goers and street peddlers and whatnot.
Yeah. So before we go like too into this, like I'll dissect it as I was browsing through it, as I was speed reading through it. It my initial take on this is pretty much Sherlock Holmes meets Adventure Time in a sense,
Yeah,
because your main character you're following, he goes to a world full of magic, and all he can do is like, it's fake. That's fake. No, that's not magic. That's an equation. This one, you're an idiot. It's this. And I'm like, well, he's as much as he likes exploring the place, he can kind of feel like a killjoy at times, especially with his baboon companions. Like, yeah, and who feels like his Watson at this point from like the first few. From the first few interactions, you're like, yeah, he's used to. What's his character's name? I forgot the main character's name.
it's
This will
great.
happen a lot.
He doesn't really reference him too much in the beginning. But while he's looking for the name, to build on that, the main character is very analytical. You can tell he's, like I said, a scientist, a researcher, very skeptical. And even though he's in this fantastic plane and universe, he kind of still, he still takes that researcher's analytical mind where he has to do things, he has to figure things out, and he's looking for logical explanations. Even though he literally kicked into another plane of existence by a baboon, he's still kind of, I guess you'd say, skeptical. Maybe he lost that luster of being in a magical world and is kind of just takes it for granted so much that it's just, just like another day in this land that he's going to.
Yeah. Oh, his name is Boone Diaz.
All right, Boone. So, yep, the main character is Boone. And, all right, so since we can sort of spoil the first issue, like I said, I want to, for the first issue, it's kind of like a tease to get to see people. If people like it enough, we'll tell the issue, because we can tell you all about something. It's kind of like when you see a World War II movie. You kind of know how it's going to go, but how the story unfolds and how the panels play out certain storylines kind of is, you don't know how that's going to play out. So that's kind of like what I'm going to try to go for here. So
So
going through the book, and you find out that he's just going through his everyday rounds in this realm, and he is summoned by the mayor or the city or whoever controls the city that he's visiting. And it turns out that, as you can tell from the cover, it says the death of the last Golden Blaze. Now, the Golden Blaze is kind of like a keeper of the city, kind of like essentially like a sheriff, a magical being, of course, that protects everyone in the city. And the mayor didn't want to announce to anybody, and they find out that it is a murder happened, and that somehow this Blaze, which is supposed to be this entity of a lot of power, so even a very powerful being, is murdered. and
Yeah,
this
so
piques the interest of the main character.
yeah, so it's one of those standard. As I said, this man's analytical. He's pretty much, as I said, a Sherlock Holmes in a seemingly magical place. And the first case he has, well, for the day, is a locked room murder, and he's already. And by that point, everyone's like, "This is impossible. How can this happen? It must have been magic." And from the first few pages, he's like, "This is how it happened."
Yeah, he figures it out. I think within a panel or two. It's still amazing means because I think
the method in which the person died is like fantastical in a sense, but to him, it's like, nah, it's rational.
it makes sense even in
It's
this
like
world where he literally takes like a slug taxi into town or to the mayor's house, if I recall correctly. So he's still, maybe I don't know if this is some sort of plot thing. I'm just throwing this out there. Maybe he's just insane. He's just like this is the way he sees the world, somewhat. Because maybe life is getting him down, as you can tell by the dual covers. So he tries to logically explain how it happens in an illogical, fantastical world, which is it's fun. I think that's a really fun thing about it. And like you said, it is little bit Adventure Time where things are a little bit kooky and crazy, but they still try to put some rationale behind it, or at least in this book, not in Adventure Time proper. But
yeah. And towards the end of it, it also deals while readers alike would be dealing with a murder case in this setting. It also gives you an interesting take on. It's also telling an origin story as well, because by the end of it, you're asking yourselves. As it turns out, he can't stay in that plane for too long, and he finds himself back in the real world, which, well, you spend an entire issue looking at colorful pages. You can start, by the time he gets back, it's all grungy. And I also noticed he seems a lot older in the normal world.
yeah, I noticed that too. But
I just noticed is like as soon as he gets back, everything he owns is more tattered. He's skinnier and older. Interesting.
yeah, he seems he complains that he's got to go, that he's feeling faint, and as you're reading, you don't know if it's because he can only stay in this world for X amount of time for whatever reasons. They don't explain it too much in the book, or But as you flip the page, you notice he goes back to his own world. Doesn't really show his method of transportation back, and it is very dark compared to the really colorful panels of where he just was in that realm. And he seems almost like a homeless guy, and he's very tattered, very old, very withered look to him. And so that is
And then by the end of it, you get a flashback of like him prior to even finding either. So you're getting like a few dual stories here. You get him what it's like for him in the real world, him in the fantastical world of the either, and then you get a nice set. Well, and you get the idea of like, all right, how did this all start?
yeah. You see, like he goes through a flashback, and you see a possible motivation of why, it's him being skeptical and super rational and trying to figure things out, and he attracts the attention of someone. And so it kind of gives you a little backstory of what possibly hints at what could happen, what led him to the fantastical world, or what introduced him to it, what opened his mind just a little bit, So that was pretty interesting. I like that. It was almost three little mini stories into, not really mini stories, but three sort of planes or panels into one book.
Yeah, because now we have because by this point it really establishes the conflicts of that world, the conflicts of the real world, and then you have this whole how did the hero become where he is now with the flashbacks.
Yeah. So what do you think is going to happen? How do you predict it's going to go next?
Well, I'm a speed reader, so I read the next 3 issues, so I kind of know what's going to happen.
I don't know that yet, but okay. But what? Okay, just going off the first issue, how did you? Is it going essentially how you predicted it would go?
Let's see. Well, for the first issue, I thought it was gonna be more of the same. Like it leaves off in the real world, so I thought we're gonna get a decent look in how he lives,
Mm-hmm.
and then before he jumps back into the murder case, which he was trying to solve. I was actually more interested to see how he lives in the normal world before he goes to the new one because we had a good sense of what he's like in the ether.
Yeah.
And of course, I was like an origin story. So the idea of how it all started, I wanted more of that too by the next issue.
Cool. All right. So that is the Ether issue 1 kind of mini review. Like I said, I don't want to spoil too much of the other story out. For now, we just want to touch on the first issue, kind of touch on a little synopsis. People can decide to give it a try. I really liked it.
By issue 1, I was like, yeah, I need to read the rest of these things.
It was totally something I wasn't expecting. Like I said, we picked 3 kind of random titles that looked interesting at a glance. So I didn't have any expectation of this. The writers at a glance didn't seem to, or the illustrators didn't seem too noticeable, or like people that I've read their works before. So I really liked, this was a nice blind pick, and I was really surprised by it, and I enjoyed it. So I can't wait to read issue 2 and 3, which I do have literally right behind me, and my huge stack of books that we'll show later. All right.